it's Originally Christian Mario, and you're here for another edition of Illuminati Media Expose. In today's video, I wanted to share with you yet another awesome expose that was done by my brother in Christ, White Rabbit, right here on YouTube. If you haven't already subscribed to his YouTube channel, I'll leave the link for you to do that in the description section below. If you enjoy the content that's produced on the TVC channel, you're definitely going to like what he's doing on his. So go ahead and subscribe, links are in the description for you to do that. Now, the one I wanted to share with you today is Avatar movie, Saturn, Wiccan, Pagan, and Satanic Symbolism. Now, I know to some of you out there, this might seem to be getting repetitive, but the Illuminati media series that I'm developing, the goal that I have is to make it the most comprehensive series ever exposing the Illuminati's mind control in the entertainment industry. And yes, you are getting brainwashed over and over and over, over and over and over, over and over and over again. So there is going to be an expose over and over again, over and over and over and over and over, exposing what is truly going on. Because the Bible is very clear that in the end times, there is going to be a new world order antichrist system that will be established. And these movies are nothing but satanic propaganda to brainwash the masses in fulfilling this agenda. So I'm going to be exposing it day in and day out as long as I'm breathing. So you can expect me to expose almost every single blockbuster movie, every single Super Bowl performance, every occult satanic thing that has ever been used by the Illuminati for mind control. I got a lot of work cut out for me. So without further ado, let's expose yet another one, a very popular movie that has so much satanic, pagan, occult symbolism in it. So let's get right into it.
How's it going, guys? White Rabbit here. Like I keep telling you guys over and over again, once you wake up and learn about all of the satanic symbolism and what's really going on in this world and who's really pulling the strings, it is almost impossible to turn on the television and not see all of this stuff constantly bombarding the average viewer. I woke up this morning and flipped through the channels and stumbled across the movie Avatar. Now, I haven't seen this movie since it came out in theaters, and at that time I was not awake. But I remember my impression of the movie at the time was positive. I thought it had a good message, I thought it had a good story, and I thought overall it was a really good movie, and a good intentioned movie too. Well, like I said, flipping through the channels this morning, and they were playing it on TV. And I watched only a few minutes of it to realize there are some serious underlying messages going on in this movie. And that's what I want to talk to you guys today about. So let's get into it. With a movie as jam-packed with occult and satanic symbolism as this one clearly is, I almost don't even know where to begin. So let's first start by examining the opening sequence.
I was free. Sooner or later, though, you always have to wake up.
Yep, just as you would expect. Right in the opening scene, they clearly make it known that the Illuminati have a heavy hand in this film. Of course, we already knew that. Just look at the budget that they spent on this film. There is no way that Hollywood, which is roughly translated to the witch's wand, by the way, would spend the kind of money that it did on this major blockbuster film and not have a giant hand in it. On the surface, this movie is about an outsider representing an imperial state who steps literally into the shoes of the indigenous people and through a journey of self-discovery comes to understand and sympathize with them. Now, obviously, on a level, this movie is clearly art reflecting life, and the evil imperial state in this movie, in more ways than one, is a direct representation of America. But I want to dig a little deeper into this movie and get to the actual symbolism in this movie, so let me point out some very significant symbology that I want you guys to understand when looking at this movie. First, this movie takes place on an alien planet called Pandora. Now, in Greek mythology, and again, all of the occult and satanic symbolism derive from Babylon, including Greek mythology and all the other different mythologies around the world. But in Greek mythology, Pandora was the very first woman who was formed out of clay by the gods. She also released all of the evils of mankind. She is the satanic representation of Eve from Genesis. So what does this mean? Well, I'm sure you've also heard of Pandora's box. Now, the box is a cube, which is a representation of Saturn. So in this movie, when we have a planet named Pandora, it is in a way a representation of Saturn, a Luciferian satanic planet or entity. In other words, what the occult are saying with this movie is that the origins of this movie and the indigenous people presented in this movie are formed from and live in a satanic world. Everything in this movie comes from satanic beliefs. And it is no coincidence that these indigenous people are so big. They are literally giants. What does that have to do with anything? Well, if we refer back to the book of Genesis, God tells us that there were giants in those days. What he is referring to is crossbreeding between fallen angels and the other forms of life on this planet, mainly humans. And in this intermingling between the fallen angels and humans, along with other animals, were formed these giant creatures. And these giant creatures have a demonic spirit. That's where demons come from. I want you to also notice that these giant indigenous people, these avatar, are not just giants, they're also cat-like, which jumps back to, of course, the Egyptians. Now, all throughout the movie, they have these indigenous people worshiping their deity in occult pagan rituals. There are many underlying and subtle things presented in this movie, one of which is the New Agey Mother Earth type belief that's being formed in our society, you know, the whole tree-hugging thing. And to that, let me just say, the Bible is very clear that God gave man dominion. So don't get that confused and don't fall for that stuff. But the underlying thing in this is they are worshiping all that is Pandora.
I'm just going to stop it right there, and I'm going to leave a link in the description section to a playlist that I've developed called the Satanic New Age Movement Exposed. The New Age movement is going to be the religion, the spirituality, the glue of the New World Order system. A lot of people are being deceived into thinking it's going to be a totalitarian control system. That is the chaos they're going to engineer. The solution will be a unified, global, peaceful system where a leader will rise up and he is going to preach a New Age philosophy and spirituality to the masses. This will be where truth becomes relative. You can have your own truth, I can have my own truth, but everyone comes together in a false sense of peace. Jesus even warned us about this time. He said that when this would occur, do not be fooled. Trouble will come shortly after they say peace, peace. And this is what the Illuminati are preparing, and we see that in this movie. If you watch it, you see that it's basically teaching you that you need to have a awakening, a consciousness shift. They are practicing these tribal pagan rituals, and it's the solution because they paint the invaders as spiritually disconnected and all this stuff, and the answer to everything is spiritual enlightenment and connection. Do not be deceived. The devil comes as an angel of light, and his form of spirituality is going to be very palpable. It's going to be nice and looking delicious, but it is pure poison. So if you're new to that, check out my New Age Movement Exposed series in the description section below.
All that is the representation of Saturn. All that is Lucifer. They are worshiping Lucifer. Do you see how it all comes full circle? And it gets way more blatant than that. In the movie, their deity that these giants worship is referred to as Iwa. Where do you guys think that name came from? Iwa. Iwa comes from the word Awa, which comes from the word Awas. Awas, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly or not, but Awas is a mysterious being summoned by Aleister Crowley and his former mentor. It's often called under the code name of Dragon, but also referred to itself as something similar to an angel. Guys, Awas is Lucifer, the same Lucifer, or at the very least demon, that Aleister Crowley communicated with. And you can believe what you want, alright? But Aleister Crowley really did communicate with demonic spirits. So we have this planet that represents Saturn, we have these indigenous giants who represent demons worshiping the planet, which represents Lucifer, and they even call this satanic deity by name. Now, this is going to get a little advanced, but I want to move to this wormhole aspect of the movie as well while we're on the subject of Saturn. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, then I suggest you guys try and do a little bit more research on it, but there are supposedly pressure points all around the globe that somehow connect the Earth to Saturn. And it is theorized that fallen angels come from Saturn and travel through the wormhole. Now, I don't know how much of that is true and how much isn't, but the satanic occult definitely believe this. And it is also represented in this movie. Now, this wormhole or Stargate, if you will, depiction also contributes to this whole idea of transhumanism. People prolonging their life by uploading their conscious thought into another biological being or computer program or what have you. So if we now move our attention to this scene, you can see these domes, which are all laid out in a very specific manner that clearly illustrates yet again the Stargate theme throughout this movie. But I want you to focus on these dragon-type creatures that they're flying. Now, the Bible sometimes refers to dragons, and most of the time when the Bible is referring to dragons, it's talking about dinosaurs, although sometimes it's talking about the serpent. Whereas when the occult talk about dragons, they're almost always talking about the serpent. In this movie, these winged creatures that they fly are absolutely representing flying serpents. They act and behave very similar to serpents. For example, in this scene, you can see them going into the snake pit, and in this scene, you can even see the fangs in these creatures that behave exactly how snake fangs behave. And while we're on the topic of fangs, we might as well go ahead and mention the vampirism theme in this movie as well. At an earlier point in this movie, when the psychic is first introduced, and also mentioned the noose around her neck, symbolic of the Freemason initiation, but when this psychic is initially introduced, you see her savoring this guy's blood. And when you take into account that they all have these vampire-type fangs, well, there you go. Now, jumping back to these flying serpents, we can again see the underlying theme of crossbreeding, which in this movie they actually refer to as a halo. Halo is another term or symbol used by the occult to represent these stargates. But it's interesting that in this movie they have these cat-like humanoids fusing their DNA somehow with these flying serpents. Keep in mind, again, that cats and serpents hold very interesting connotations in Egyptian mythology as well as the occult. Next, let's move our attention to the Tree of Souls. This mystical tree that is portrayed in this movie as a willow tree has all kinds of connotations in itself. The willow tree, or willow wood, is used in ceremonies intended for enhancement of psychic abilities, honoring the moon, as well as increase the essence of love in our lives. It has moon connotations, so that takes you back to Isis, and anyone who doubts that Hollywood is fully aware of all of these occult meanings behind all of these different things that they put in their movies, just keep in mind that they specifically chose a willow or a tree that looks like a willow tree as a focal point in this movie where the psychic worships from and conjures up spirits from. Also keep in mind that the only love scene in the movie happens in the middle of the willow tree. They know exactly what this stuff represents, guys, and they are deliberately putting it into these movies. Now, also, the willow tree, due to its slender branches and narrow leaves, is also associated with the serpent. there's the serpent again. And there's also a connection to be made between the femininity of the willow tree and the serpent to equate to the goddess of the underworld, but I digress. Another tree portrayed in this movie is where all the natives live. It is described as having outer columns and the inside comprised of an outer circle and an inner circle. And then he describes it as having a spiral leading up the middle of it. He talks about the columns, which are very significant in the occult. He talks about the outer circle and the inner circle, talking specifically about the illumined ones, the Illuminati. And he mentions the spiral, again talking about the Stargate or the Freemason ladder connecting this world to the next. And the last major point I want to bring up is the depiction of the apocalypse that this movie portrays. The movie subtly describes it as the place the eye does not see, and it is depicted as a barren wasteland. So there you go, guys. Those are just some of the main things that I wanted to mention to you about the movie Avatar. There are some other satanic symbols that I didn't have time to get into. For example, the compound that the Imperial State claims as home base is in the shape of a pentagon, which of course is representative of the satanic pentagram. And there's other things like that all throughout this movie. It is a very satanic and occult-driven movie. And hopefully I did a decent enough job explaining some of the things to you. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for everyone who's been sharing my videos. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Thanks, and God bless.
Thanks so much for taking the time, everyone. It was an absolute pleasure to show you this expose, exposing, again, that people everywhere they look are going to be hit with this mind control. One of the things I like to point out, too, is the fact that this movie really shows us how the establishment of the Antichrist system will take place. The people that were coming to take over, the Imperial group, coming from that pentagon-shaped place, they're made out to be the evil, coming Hitler-type system. And you see how the occult awakening was the solution. This is what's going to play out in the end times. There's going to be chaos created. There's going to seem like they're coming to bring in this prison planet and everything. And in the middle of that, they are going to arise a leader who will instigate a spiritual revolution, but that spirituality is false. Check out my playlist below. It will be the false messiah, the false gospel of the Antichrist. Thanks so much for taking the time. This is the Vigilant Christian saying God bless each and every one of you. And as always, remember to stay vigilant. God bless.